Traumatic Brain Injuries by Brenna Vicenti. Traumatic brain injuries by Brenna Vicenti. The definition of a traumatic brain injury is a head injury causing reduced cognitive functioning, limited attention, and impulsivity, from Smith, page 434. And it can include related characteristics as students with learning disabilities. And they include some challenges in life. Challenges in life include the challenge to be independent, gain employment, and be involved in the community. There is typically intense support in order for these goals to be obtained. The definition of traumatic brain injury from the federal government states, a traumatic brain injury means an acquired injury to the brain caused by an external physical force, resulting in total or partial functioning disability or psychosocial impairment, or both, that adversely affect a child's educational performance. Traumatic brain injury applies to open or closed head injuries resulting in impairments in one or more areas, such as cognition, language, memory, attention, reasoning, abstract thinking, judgment, problem solving, sensory, perceptual, and motor abilities, psychosocial behavior, physical functions, information processing, and speech. The term does not apply to brain injuries that are congenital or degenerative, or to brain injuries induced by birth trauma. And this definition was given by the U.S. Department of Education in 2006. We will now discuss the parts of the brain, the first being the cerebellum. The primary function of this part of the brain is to control voluntary movements, including motor movements, balance, and equilibrium. As you can see, it is located at the bottom of the brain near the stem, on the back side of the brain. Compared to the frontal lobe, it is well protected from trauma. Injury here causes slow movements and incoordination. There are then tendencies to sway or stagger when one is walking. The frontal lobe is in charge of motor function, problem solving, spontaneity, memory, language, initiation, judgment, impulse control, and social and sexual behavior. The frontal lobe is in the front of the brain, as you can see by its name. Since it is in the front, it is the most susceptible to injury. Left and right frontal lobe have different controls. The left controls language related to movements, whereas the right is more involved in nonverbal movements. Some researchers argue against this, though. Some signs and symptoms if this injury has occurred are that the arms, fingers, and hands will lose their movements and strength. There will also be less spontaneous facial expressions, and Broca's aphasia can occur, which is when a person has difficulty speaking. A fun fact is that IQ scores are not as affected by this trauma. And a reason for this is that IQ involves a more outside, different part of the brain with knowledge than the frontal lobe is in charge of. The occipital lobe's main job is for visual perception. It is located in the back of the brain, where it is less likely to get injured, but still any trauma can affect vision, such as visual field defects and scotomas. The perisistrate region of the occipital lobe is in charge of visual-spatial processing and differentiation, movements, and colors. Some signs and symptoms if this injury occurred are loss of vision, hallucinations in vision, distorted perceptions, like objects and visions may appear smaller or larger than they actually are, and colors are distorted in regular colors as well. There may also be writing impairments and word blindness. The parietal lobe is located, as you can see, at the top middle part of the brain, and it can be divided into two regions: the sensation and perception that comes from cognition, and sensory input that mostly has to do with vision. Coordinates and the world around us with spatial coordination also has to do with this. Gerstmann syndrome is damage with the left lobe, and it causes right and left confusion. Agraphia, which is difficulty in writing. Akleklia, problems with math. Aphasia, which is when there's difficulty in language. And agnosia, which is complications with perceiving objects. If there is damage to the right lobe, there is a contralateral neglect, which affects dressing and washing oneself. When there is negative effects to that, then the person cannot do it as well. It affects how someone can create things, and it negatively affects one's drawing abilities as well. There is also Balance syndrome, which is visual and motor syndrome, and that is when both sides are affected in the parietal lobe. The brainstem is what connects the brain to the rest of the body, and it is made of 3 parts: the medulla oblongata, pons, and the midbrain, which is going down towards the spine. It is in charge of basic attention skills, arousal, consciousness, and all information needed passes through our brainstem and our bodies, and vice versa. It goes from the body also to the brain. And its location makes it susceptible to trauma as it is near a lot of bony areas. And if something were to happen to the brainstem, it is very traumatic, as the involuntary nervous system is affected, and that is what controls heart rate, breathing, and blood pressure. And such injury can result in immediate death. The temporal lobe is in charge of language and memory skills. And if an injury were to occur to this section of the brain, language skills would be affected. If the left side was affected, recognition of words would be disturbed, and if the right side was affected, there would be a loss of inhibition of talking. And there would also be an effect on memory skills, which is impaired memory or verbal information that can be impaired. And seizures can majorly affect one's personality, and seizures can happen when the temporal lobe is affected, and someone's speech can be affected afterwards. Someone can be paranoid a lot, and it can also bring out one's aggressive behavior. Here are 6 accommodations that a teacher can use in a school, or anyone can use in an education system for a child or a student that has undergone a traumatic brain injury. First is to post class rules with pictures and words. This way the child can see the rules and know what to do, what not to do, and it can also have a visual representation of what is going on. And they can also be reminded by it being on a wall hung up where they can see it easily. A teacher can also reduce the length of assignments. This makes it easier for the child to work on the assignments without getting overwhelmed. If their brain cannot take that much work, a teacher should also use simple sentences and give nonverbal cues to discontinue inappropriate behavior. This way, the behavior child might not know what is wrong and what is right, depending on what part of their brain is affected. Their behavior might be affected, so a teacher can give a simple cue, like a certain look or something, for the child to know not to do that behavior. They can also enlarge text on technology, so on a tablet, computer, anything like that, the text can be enlarged so that way the student can read it easier. And teachers can circulate the classroom and be available for help, so that when children or students are struggling, they can ask the circulating teacher for assistance. If you click on the link, here's a video that tells an impactful story of a young man named Tyler and how his traumatic brain injury affected him and his recovery. And his traumatic brain injury was caused by an intense car accident, and the video shows the beginning of it to the end and his recovery.